I just want to share some of my thoughts, and I want to see if I'm the only one that thinks the way I do. Have you ever been sitting in a room full of people and thought, how is nobody questioning this? And I think that's a huge part of why NPC theory fascinates me. And just a little side note before I get into this, I'll do an entire episode on simulation theory at some point, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down. Even as a young child, I always had this innate feeling that life was somehow a simulation. I couldn't pinpoint why, and I definitely didn't have a word for it. I went to CCD classes, I went to church, I made my confirmation. I was taught about all the traditional explanations about life, death, heaven, hell, all of it. But underneath all of that, I always had this strange feeling that what we were experiencing wasn't all of it. Almost like there was something behind it. I didn't know the term simulation theory. I didn't know anything about philosophy or consciousness. I just remember having that feeling. And I'll get much deeper into that in another episode. But I think it probably explains, at least in part, my fascination with NPC theory. So NPC stands for non-player character. In a video game, an NPC moves through the world following a programmed script, a set of behaviors, what they're supposed to say, go where they're supposed to go. And rarely do they step outside of that script. And there's an even more controversial interpretation of what an NPC is. Like, some people believe that NPCs are born into this world and they're soulless. People like Dolores Cannon touch upon that. I personally don't necessarily believe that. I think these people may be moving through life completely on autopilot. They're kind of following patterns, beliefs, and scripts that they never really stop to question. Wake up. Go to work. Repeat the same conversations. Repeat the same opinions. Come home. Scroll. Go to sleep. Repeat. And I think all of us are capable into slipping into that mode. But what's interesting to me is that something in your life can completely break that pattern. A death, a divorce, a health crisis, a betrayal, a spiritual experience, or even a major event happening in the world that makes you completely stop and think. Like, wait, why am I actually accepting this? COVID was one of those moments for me that really made this belief come alive. Because regardless of where you stood politically or medically, it was fascinating for me to watch how society adapted to new behaviors, new rules, narratives. 6 feet apart, arrows on floors, constant headlines, people intensely defending whatever side of the aisle they landed on. And what stood out to me wasn't even necessarily the side of the aisle that they were on. It was how uncomfortable questioning itself became. Like, people who often question the dominant narrative, they were ridiculed. And I'm also aware that rejecting everything can also become its own script too. And I think that's the point. It's not about automatically believing the mainstream, and it's not about automatically rejecting it. It's kind of about actually thinking. I've always been a type of person that always feels uncomfortable when an entire room thinks exactly the same way. And it's not because I assume that I'm right. I just kind of want to know how everyone arrived to the same conclusion so quickly. I'll watch gossip spread through a room and suddenly everybody is reacting like they witnessed it. I'll hear people repeat something that they saw in the news word for word and think, did you actually come to that conclusion yourself? Or did you just hear it enough times that it became true in your mind? And that's where the NPC concept becomes so interesting to me. Because maybe the NPC role isn't permanent. Maybe people can break out of it. Sometimes it takes a major life circumstance. Something shakes your worldview enough that you stop moving automatically. You start asking questions. You start examining your own beliefs. You start noticing how much of what you thought was you was actually inherited, repeated, or socially enforced. And suddenly you're just not following the script anymore. You're like, fuck it. You are consciously deciding what you believe. And that to me is much closer of what an actual awakening is. It's not becoming better than everybody else. It's not believing that you know some secret truth. Just becoming aware enough to ask why I believe what I believe. So maybe an NPC isn't a certain type of person. Maybe it's a role that any of us can fall into. Autopilot, repetition, groupthink, following the script because it's easier than questioning it. And maybe certain experiences come into our life to interrupt that, to make us uncomfortable enough to finally wake up and ask, do I actually believe this, or have I just been programmed to repeat it? Because maybe becoming the player isn't about knowing more than everybody else. Maybe it's simply realizing that you are allowed to question the script. And I think the goal isn't to find all the NPCs in the world, because that's pretty easy to do. I think the goal for me is to notice when you're on autopilot. Awareness isn't about realizing when everybody else is asleep. I think it's about realizing how often you are too.